Um, as the vice chair of the Bethlehem IDA, I've been asked to chair the meeting in Frank's absence. Thank you all for being here this morning. I note that we have a quorum, and therefore I would like to open this meeting as of 8 a.m. on Wednesday, July 22nd. The first item of business is approval of the minutes from our regular meeting on June 24th. Do we have any updates, questions, or comments on the minutes?
No.
Oh.
No.
Welcome, Tim. We now have more than a quorum. Thank you for joining us. We've opened the meeting, and I was just asking if there were questions, comments, or updates to the minutes of June 24th. Hearing none, can I have a motion to adopt the minutes?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I didn't, who was the
Any-
second?
Tim Minicha.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. The motion passes. The main item on our agenda this morning is under new business. We're bringing to the members documents for the proposed grant program that we've been discussing. We do have a little bit of other business, so I would ask to rearrange the schedule slightly. I have a hard stop just before 9 a.m. With a quorum, you continue to, if need be, you can continue to take action, but I would like to get the discussion and review of the grant program done first. So I would ask for reports of committees and communications, if any. We can touch very briefly on planning board and ED coordinator, but I'm going to ask Al if you could hold the review of the financial statements until after the board has had the chance to discuss the grant program.
Not a problem.
And I do want to note here that the next regular meeting is expected also to be remote. That's on Wednesday, August 26th. So do we have any reports of committees this morning?
No reports of committees.
Thank you. Other communications?
No other communications.
Okay, and item number 4 under old business from the planning board, Rob?
Yeah, Victoria, I have no updates since our last meeting.
Okay. Anything on behalf of economic development coordination?
No, nothing new to report.
All right, thank you. Then I would like to move to item number 2 under new business, and this is presented in items C through G, excuse me. Yes, items in your packet starting on page 7A with the summary from Hodgson Russ. There's also a copy of the authority's budget office policy guidance. None of these are new to the members. A policy that has been drafted by a couple of members with Tom's significant assistance and is before you an application that is proposed for small businesses and other eligible entities to use in applying for a grant award and then a grant agreement that they would enter into. So I would actually like to ask Tom and Catherine, who were very instrumental in working through this and talking about it, if you could give the members a brief overview of what's been discussed and any important points that haven't been presented before.
Yes, thank you, Victoria. We presented here a policy to be adopted by the agency for the agency to make 50 grants of up to $500 to reimburse small businesses and not-for-profits which have purchased PPE and/or installed fixtures necessary to prevent the spread of COVID-19. To be eligible, a small business or not-for-profit must be physically located within the town, must have been in operation on March 7, 2020, must not have more than 50 full-time employees, must conduct business within the town, must have been negatively affected by the state disaster emergency, and must have been financially viable prior to March 7, 2020. The March 7, 2020 date is the date that the disaster emergency began under executive order. So that's the importance of that date. I don't want to engage in a monologue. I think it's sufficient to say that in the policy and application and agreement, we have tracked the statute and the guidance, which are attached. In order to proceed, the agency must, by resolution, adopt the policy, the application, and the agreement. So why don't I turn it over to questions? Oh, Kate, would you like to add something?
No, you covered it pretty well, Tom. Thanks.
I do have a couple of questions, more clarification than anything else. First of all, thanks, Kate and Tom, for putting this together. But I just want to make, when I first read the policy, I thought there was just a slight inconsistency or confusion that I'd like clarified. We talk in the first paragraph about the grants are to be used to defray unexpected expenses, which when I read it sounds more prospective than retroactive, as opposed to just saying the grants are to be used to reimburse expenses incurred or something like that. Because I think that in point 2 and in point 4 of the grant, it's clear that it's a reimbursement for expenses incurred. And so I thought we might just, whether anybody else sort of views that as an inconsistency that needs to be clarified or not. That's my first point. That we ought to just, as opposed to, because when I defray unexpected expenses, almost sounds like we're giving them money for something that they, in advance of them needing to make a fix or something. Does anybody else read it that way? Or?
It could be that, but we're trying to make it a reimbursement because one of the key things is we have to have proof of the expense.
Right. No, I understand that, but that's why I would just change that one sentence instead of reading used to defray unexpected expenses to read the grants are to be used to reimburse, costs incurred or something like that, just so it's clear. Because that's basically what you're saying in point 2 and in point 4. You're saying it's to reimburse the cost of purchases. In 2 and in 4, I think you said the same thing. The eligible entity must have already purchased and installed the equipment or the PPE and submit proof of that they have done so in order to qualify for the grant. So I thought we just ought to be consistent all the way through. That's all.
That's fine. I don't have any problem with that. The role of that first paragraph was try to explain this in layman's language and not so legalistically.
Yeah, okay.
What's going on, that's all.
Right, okay. But just, if you might just consider that change. And then again, I've written enough legislation and guidance in my time to want to be clear we talk about things like we're under like 1B, that the entity was in operation prior to March 7th. That's sort of an open-ended interpretation. They could have been out of business on March 7th, but in business on March 1st or something, or in business last year. So I would just say we were in operation as of March 7th. They had been financially viable as of March 7th, as opposed to prior to. So there's no confusion that somebody who was in business last year could apply for this thing.
What did you say about prior to?
Well, just like
I didn't get to-
1B, instead of we're in operation prior to March 7th, that's open-ended as to.
Yes, I got that. That's as of.
So as of, and then the same thing for F, that they've been financially viable as of March 7th. And I think in the grant application itself, I think we'd have to just make sort of similar changes. Yeah, or we keep talking about prior to or something, I'd make it as of. Just avoids any confusion or anybody applying who would not necessarily be eligible. And then the only other question I had, again, if you sort of, my overall question is, I didn't see anything, and maybe it's, I just didn't see it. What guidance we are going to use to evaluate each of the applications? Clearly, we could end up with a lot more than 50 businesses applying. And are we going to establish internally any kind of prioritization or any kind of criteria that would allow us to make a decision as to which entities would get the grants and which may not? For example, is it based on the total investment that they've already made in PPE or equipment, the actual number of employees they have, the nature of the business? When we give money to a restaurant owned by a single guy as opposed to a bank branch or something like that, what's the criteria that we're going to use to evaluate the applicants?
Well, David, none of those criteria are in the statute or in the guidance.
No, I understand, but if we have 75 applicants and we're only going to give out 50 grants, we have to decide why these other 25 would not qualify for a grant.
Prior to dreaming up the 25 grants of $500, we talked to the Bethlehem Chamber, which had a similar grant program, and their grant program was $200, and they had 35 applicants. So I thought with 50, we're supposed to have 50
grants,
50 grants, it was a safe margin of error, but we're also doing it on first come, first serve.
Okay, that's the criteria.
But the idea is that hopefully we'll have money for everybody who comes and who meets the criteria set forth in the statute.
Okay. So if we end up with 70, with more than 50 applicants, would we then scale back the grant award to less than $500 each, or would some get 500 and some get less than 500, or how would that work?
Already they're actually only going to get their actual cost.
Right, but assuming that their costs exceed $500.
Yes.
Would some get the max and some get less if we get more than 50, or we give only 50 businesses the max? Or how have we thought about how we're going to allocate this $25,000 if we have more than 50 applicants?
There has been some discussion and thinking back and forth, but Catherine, you were about to speak. Did I see your screen?
Yes, I mean, David, I think one of the things we wanted to do was to keep this as simple as possible in light of the $500 value to it. Having been involved in other programs such as this and other loan programs as well with larger amounts of money that would warrant such criteria and more of a review of the applicant and what they're asking for. I think your point is well taken of, if there's over that 50, what do we do? But I think administratively, to keep it simple, when the application comes in to the town or wherever it's coming to, it gets a date stamp and it's considered, in the first come, first serve basis. And we just make that crystal clear. And then we make an announcement, whether that's on the website or whatever the case may be, that, thank you everyone that's applied, we're out of money. I just don't want to overcomplicate it, but I mean, your point's well taken, but it's $500. You know what I mean?
No, it's not a lot of money. We may not get a lot of applicants.
Yeah.
But is there a cutoff date? If you don't apply by a certain date, you would not be eligible. I mean, we could start giving out a lot of $500 grants the first day, and then all of a sudden get a rush of applicants. As the pot dwindles, we could still be getting a lot of applicants who may not then be, we may not be able to allocate the $500 to them.
That's why I think it's important that, we get the applications in, and once we've met that number, we announce that and say, the pot is empty. I think that is our statement, and that first come, first serve, and then we let them know, hey, we're out of money, congratulations to, these folks that did get a grant.
Okay. So that sort of is our criteria. It's more first come, first serve than the quality of the applicant or something,
I have some question, but I have a comment on that, if I may.
Sure.
One thing when Rob and Kate and I were involved with the small business, we had a paper chase. We had Liz there that could run around and work hard to make sure all the applicants completed the paper completely. We don't have, we don't have the staff to do that. So I think one criteria in my mind is the quality and the completeness of the original application. And if it's not complete, we just can't run around and try to get more information from these people. And so I think that, that could be a criteria right there in the process. If they don't complete a proper application, they're done.
Right. No, I would agree with that. Again, I think my biggest concern is that if we end up with sort of a winners losers, where there are some businesses that do not receive the grant even though they may otherwise be eligible, we're going to need to be able to explain why some businesses were denied a grant. And if it's strictly you were the 51st applicant, I mean, that's fine. But, there is a potential that we're going to be challenged as to why someone did not get a grant and someone else did. Or that this entity that may be a franchise as opposed to a mom and pop operation was awarded a grant and not the local business guy. And so I just want to, we don't need to necessarily do something publicly, but I think internally we need to sort of understand what the process is going to be to evaluate and award the grants.
Well, so if we stated internally that, once if there's and Dick, I think that's a great recommendation. I think that if someone's application isn't complete, then it goes in the denied, pile. I think you're right. We don't have the ability to call them up and say, hey, we need X, Y, and Z. But for transparency purposes, I think if we have to turn someone down, we probably should produce a letter with a reason and document that. And it probably is going to be one of two things. One, your application wasn't complete, or two, you're 51, and by not spelling out criteria, I think it almost is better for us because it really is first come, first serve. We're not passing on what you spent the money on. We're not looking at what kind of company you are. It's just too little money for that.
Right.
So if we said more explicitly, as we have now said a few times here, this is on a first come, first served basis, or as long as funds are available. If we stated that in the application and in the description here, David, does that clear things up?
That's fine. I did not, I mean, I did not see anything in writing that said it was first come, first serve, and that's a perfectly valid, criteria. But again, I just thought that if, again, if we as a board collectively are going to evaluate the proposals and approve them, that whether or not there was some criteria that we were going to have to apply, if it's strictly on a first come, first served basis and the application is complete, that's fine. That's the process we're following. And it behooves you as a business or a potential applicant to get your application in day one, especially since it's retroactive. So all these businesses would have already incurred this expense and should be jumping at the chance to get the money if they think that it's worth from their end to pursue the $500. So again, first come and first serve is fine, but I would agree with Tim. I think we ought to at least state that in the application then, that the money, that's how the funds are going to be allocated, on the completeness of the application and on the timeliness of the application.
And we'll have to make sure that staff is clear when it comes in to put a date stamp on that, just to cover us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Perhaps a change in the policy number 10 to reflect an initial statement that says grants will be awarded on a first come, first served basis, maybe hyphen complete application until all funds are awarded, and then have it read this grant program will terminate on 12/31.
Yeah, that's fine. That's perfect.
Yes, and to that, I think we could just say as well that the completeness of the application will, and I'm making up language as I speak here, but the completeness of the application should be a criteria for getting into the pool. So we want to be very clear about that. I hope that we have a reputation for working with entities in other ways to help them through the application process. We don't have the ability to do that here, as Kate said. What I don't think needs to be in this policy. So I think those three things, as we've been discussing, should be added to the policy. But I want to avoid stating in the policy that if your application is incomplete, you're rejected. It may be that if it's incomplete, you go to the bottom of the list or reapply or something like that, and let it be on them. And if there is still money and they come back later with a complete application, I wouldn't be comfortable saying no if we still have the funds.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
So who will tell them that?
Well, I think that we have two letters. One is congratulations, you've met all the criteria, we can fund you because we have the money. And then the letter number 2 would be, we are not funding you for this reason. You're not eligible, your application is incomplete, or we're out of funds. And then we can say, if you are denied because your application is incomplete, you may reapply, but you will have a new date stamp based on the reapplication. And that goes to if we're out of money. And then something happens and we get more money. There's the CARES Act. There could be other sources.
Sure.
We could have a bank give us $5,000. I know everyone's asking. But if we are able to refund with non-IDA funds, then I think that we could use this process to reach more businesses.
So who would be sending out those letters? Is it Tom? Is it, do we
I
need to
assume it would be the staff because that's what our job is.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying, we probably, from oversight perspective as well, maybe the applications go back to the committee before a letter goes out from the town, just to make sure that, I don't want to put a million layers on this, but we don't want to leave it up to just staff to make that, decision. And maybe you're right. Maybe there's a couple letter templates that would work well with that. What do you think, Tom?
It sounds fine to me.
Okay.
Yeah. Doesn't have to be a letter. We were asking for emails, addresses. Can we just send them an email and just have a draft email?
Sure, as long as we
Sure.
retain it pursuant to our document retention
Right,
policy.
yeah, and then just BCC everybody, and you can send one email to 50 people, 50 businesses, and say, we've received your application and it's under consideration or whatever, you know. You'd have to send out 50 separate letters that way. I think that meets the legal requirement that we've, you know, as long as we keep the emails. Okay.
I have a
So
question, if I may.
please,
It's more in the criteria. There's an eligibility has to be physically located in the town of Bethlehem. I understand, but I don't understand conduct business within the town. What is the definition of conducting business within the town?
Well, it's you can live within the town. For example, you were an accountant at Urbach Young. I forgot the old name, not the current one. But did you do business within the town? Do you have clients within the town? Do you have? What we're really hoping for is some physical evidence of business within the town.
Well, I can
I think-
understand physically located. Okay, I have a place of business, but what if I'm a food broker and my customers are global, all over the United States, and I don't have anybody in Bethlehem? I just think I physically located and doing business within the town, but I don't know, you know, conduct business within the town. Maybe it's just me. I just don't understand that, why that's a criteria.
Dick, if you
Well,
remember.
I think it's part of the statute.
Yeah,
I
and
don't
Dick, if you remember, maybe Rob can chime in on the other grant program. I think we discussed this issue where you had the company was here, their office was here, but they weren't actually transacting business within the town.
Right.
And-
They were producing products somewhere else in the state, but their physical presence of an office was, I think, in their house, and all their manufacturing was done someplace out of Bethlehem. Do we want to provide funding for PPE for you know, and fixtures for another location outside of the town?
Oh, that's different. No, I fully agree.
Okay.
Okay, but if they're located within the town, okay, maybe the criteria of conducting business within the town, they have to have at least one employee. Okay, I think, you know, and then, Kate, I remember that specifically where we had that issue with really not having a business in town. But I think that you can have a viable location and not do business within the town of Bethlehem.
Well, to Tom's point, and I'd have to go back and look because it's been a little bit, but I think that was language used, right, Tom?
It is. It's in the
Yeah.
statute.
So they're putting this, the legal authority, the statutory authority, the rule authority, I forget what form it is basically putting the limitation, geographic limitation and other limitations on who may receive the money. So, you know, to your point, if that requires clarification of exactly what that means, maybe there's some other language we could put in there, I suppose, that says, you know, you have to actually transact business in the town. Again, it's $500.
Oh no,
So-
I understand. That's why I feel if a business if they have a physical location, a real location in the town, that's conducting business.
Yeah.
That's why. And if I look at Hodgkin Russ's note, it says conducts business in the area served by the IDA. And conducting business is having a physical presence.
Well, it could be, and I had the advantage of just knowing about some other, you know, statutes and language out there,
Mhm.
but it could be directly tied to, are we generating sales tax revenue in the town that ultimately comes back to us, right? So I don't know. I mean, if it needs clarification, or if we're going to get hung up on it, then maybe it's a case by case analysis of what the business is. I don't know.
Kate's
I think
point,
I'm capable. I'm sorry.
as we've been discussing, it's $500, and we do want to keep this very clear. We need a very clear paper trail for positive and negative decisions. And we've been trying to make it fairly automatic so that we are not having to say, well, we made this decision here and that decision there according to a lot of other criteria that weren't published. And therefore, by saying must conduct business within the town, I think that sends a very clear message that if you're a sole proprietor and all of your workforce is in Ohio, you're not our target. We want that nexus. We want to know that the business is not just within the town, but that the conducting of business, either through salaries or purchases or people living in the community, is creating an economic and social benefit within the community. And so what's proposed is what we had hoped would be a very straightforward way of saying, we want a business who is part of our community.
Well said. Yes.
Okay, I just want. I'm fine. I was trying to make it easier. Okay, not make it harder. It wasn't. I wasn't trying to make restrictions. I was just saying, okay, they have to be a business in the town, and then we decide. But that's okay. Whatever you want to do is okay with me. I'm not.
Yeah. Oh, Dick, I'm really glad that you raised that point, because we will be asked, and you've really helped us think through this.
Okay, that was my question.
Do we have other questions or language adjustments in the policy? And the additional criteria, I would like to see at least some draft language, because if the members do want to vote on this morning, if we're going to vote, I think we need to see some draft language, and I was not making notes. But let's take a look then at the application and the grant agreement. Any comments or questions about the form of the grant application?
Again, just a couple of quick ones. Just like to get a sense from the folks who put this together. We're asking, like, at the bottom of the page, first page, the average monthly spending on PPE. We're asking for that as opposed to like their total spending to date. Again, one criteria that we may want to consider is if you've spent, $1,000 on making improvements or complying with the COVID requirements, as opposed to $501, that you would get preferred review from us or something. So why are we not asking for total spending to date on PPE and fixtures, or anticipated future expenditure or something like that, as opposed to just the average monthly spending on PPE? What's the value of knowing how much they spend in an average month, as opposed to how much they spend overall today?
So I think because I had provided comments on this question, or I provided background on this question. The focus here was the expectation is that the $500 is probably going to cover a portion of a monthly cost. Right. So let's find out what the monthly cost is and find out how much we're contributing towards that monthly cost. If somebody ends up spending $1,000 a month, are we contributing at least 1 month half of that cost? Rather than looking at it over how much have you spent in total, I'd rather know what good are we doing to contribute to offsetting expenses on a monthly basis, rather than since they all reopened again. So from a reporting standpoint, we can say, we were able to help on costs on a monthly basis for these businesses, offsetting maybe half the cost that they typically would undertake. Or maybe it was the full cost. Maybe a business was only spending $500 a month, And so we're able to say, at least for 1 month, we were able to help defray the cost of these unexpected expenses.
Okay.
We had talked to Tim McCann at the last meeting, and Tim said he was giving us some background information on what the monthly costs folks are incurring. And so when you break it down to a monthly cost, it seems more realistic as far as, the good that we're doing to help these businesses.
Okay. I mean, that there's a logic there. I understand. Okay. Again, when I first thought of that, it was more in the context of if we were going to end up with criteria for evaluating and comparing businesses, applicants, then to me, I think the total spending on improvements was more valuable than an average monthly, because they could have, they could have spent $1,000 in March and nothing in April, May, and June, and their average monthly expense becomes, $250, as opposed to we spent $1,000 to comply with state guidelines, and you're giving us half of, we're getting half of that back from the IDA. That's great, as opposed to, we're only spending, what we spent 6 months ago, and we're not incurring any other expenses since then. And so their average monthly spending is going to be, much less than what, gives us a falser picture of how much of what their actual expenses are than what they actually spend. That's all.
I think, overall with this, and my issue with it from the beginning was not the program, because I think it's a great program and, it's what we should be looking at doing. But $500 is $500, and we're getting in the weeds on this, and down to the detail. And David, I get it. It's public money, and larger sums would really require more scrutiny. But even as it is, asking for that information, if you can show me a receipt that you bought PPE and it totals $600, I mean, that's enough right there. You know what I mean?
Okay, no, that's true. They have to submit the receipts, right?
Yeah, I mean, if we were going to give, like, Cahoes is doing up to 5,000, and that really took a little bit more.
Yeah, Clifton Park's the same thing, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, but with this, I mean, if you can show a receipt and you do business in the town, and that's what it's about,
Okay.
I just don't want to get in the weeds on this, because.
I withdraw my question.
Okay. No, I don't want to, stymie debate or discussion on it, but I just, that's been my issue from the get-go. Is you're right, we should be doing all these things, but does $500 really warrant that? And I can't say that it does. That's all.
Okay. And with the receipt, with the submission of a receipt, we will understand the nature of the purchase, because what we're not asking for is what you actually spend it on. We're just merely, did you spend it on PPE, or did you spend it on some kind of physical renovation to your building? But if we get the receipt, we'll know what those costs were, right? I mean,
Yes.
what changes they actually, or what purchases they actually had to make. Okay. Then the only other questions I had, again, it's minor wordsmithing. You have under part 3, the declaration, the first declaration they have to make is the applicant, does not have more than 50 employees as of March 7th. And that's just the wordsmith. They did not have more. And again, as opposed to prior and things like that. Excuse me. Just so the application is, again, the wording is consistent with the policy guidance.
Can I just interrupt something real quick based on what the conversation was going? So, based on this conversation, it's leading me to believe that the expectation is, as part of the application, someone will submit their receipt with the application. Did I hear that correctly?
Well, that's how I envisioned it. I mean, because otherwise, so they apply. Yeah. And you say, okay, well, it's retroactive, right? It's reimbursement. What are you asking for it to cover? You know what I mean? So it would seem to me that we should say, please attach, receipts to back up your request for the amount. and keep it simple. I mean, if they can show a receipt for $800 for PPE and want 5, then that's enough in and of itself. I'm just trying to keep it real practical.
Yeah, no, I agree. We're on the same page, Kate. I agree with you. I think we just need to insert an item here that says receipt and a checkbox. Receipt submitted, so that somebody knows they need to submit the receipt.
Exactly.
So maybe after on the application, after on page 2, fixtures necessary, because that's the section where we have purpose. We have grant amount request not to exceed 500, and that's where they're going to enter in the amount. So let's say they put in $500. They'll check PPE, and then let's have another line underneath fixtures that says receipt attached and put a checkbox.
Yeah, I mean, you have to remember we're kind of making this up as we go along, right? Our program is reimbursement. A lot of what, I think David's used to seeing, I'm used to seeing, is that we're going to spend the money on this, right? So it takes more of a scrutiny, more of a, with this, I think, that once we see the receipt, everything else seems to be in order on the form or whatever, then that can go to a committee of the board and they can approve, much, and that could be done immediately.
Right. And I think, but I would agree with Rob. I think what we need is something that says receipt for expenditure incurred is attached. They could have spent $1,000, but they're going to send in a receipt for $500.
Exactly. Or they'll send the receipt for $1,000, and we're just going to give them 500.
Right.
Yeah.
Or they could say, well, we really want just reimbursement for this one expense that we had, which was buying something that cost $500.
Correct.
Same thing. So, but I think we do need them to submit the documentation, and that's not in the application.
Pursuant to what David said earlier on the policy, I also recommend that in declarations, in addition to saying the applicant did not have more than 50 FTEs, the next declaration read the applicant was in operation as of
Exactly.
March 7 and financially viable as of. And there's something that I just noticed that I think it's important. We are asking that each applicant declare that they were negatively affected by the emergency, but I think we also should have them declare not only that they did not have more than 50 prior to as of March 7, but they don't now. There are some businesses that are in fact both negatively impacted, but adding employees because of demand. And I think we just want to be upfront. You can't have more than 50 now. Unless the statute enables, it doesn't cap current FTEs.
Well, we wouldn't be a small business eligible if you had more than 50 employees, right? Isn't that, if at the time they applied, they had 100 employees, they would not qualify under the definition of a eligible entity, right?
That's absolutely true, but having them declare that would be useful here.
No, I don't disagree. I think that's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
And
So I'm
then
noting, and does not now have more than 50 FT.
Full-time.
And then I think if you come down to the 5th declaration, the funds will be used for personal protective equipment. Again, that sounds prospective as opposed to the funds will be reimbursement, will reimburse the applicant for the cost of PPE and fixtures purchased or installed necessary to prevent the spread of COVID.
You can say have been.
Yeah, have been used. Yeah. Well, the grant. The funds to me sounds like it's the $500. So I think you'd have to say that the funds or the grant will reimburse the applicant for the cost of PPE and fixtures already purchased or installed, something like that.
David, what number are you on?
It's like the 5th checkbox under declaration. So it says.
Are you on the application or the policy?
No, the application. I'm sorry. It says the funds will be used for personal protective equipment or fixtures, which to me sounds I assume the funds means the $500 or whatever they receive. And since this is a reimbursement, I think we ought to be clear that and say the grant will reimburse the applicant for the cost of PPE or fixtures already purchased or installed or something like that. So it's clear that they're acknowledging that they've incurred the cost. Yeah, even parenthetical, see receipt for expenses.
What I've noted for that one is the funds will reimburse the applicant. And I think that that's important because if they made a payment, but they're waiting for the contractor to install, we don't want to get in there. We want it on a reimbursement basis, absolutely.
Right, right.
I'm not the only one with a hard stop at 9 this morning. So let's see if we can, get all of the questions on the table for this.
Okay.
Are there any questions or updates?
I have,
Go ahead,
of
Dave.
course. On the declarations, shouldn't we have a declaration that the applicant consents to the reporting requirements that we're going to be subject to? I mean, their name is going to be on the parish report and the amount, and we should have some sort. I would believe we should have a declaration that they concur that as part of this grant, that whatever reporting obligation we have, they consent to.
If we do that, I think we need to be very clear about what our reporting requirements are in the application as well. Do you think that's the right place to have it?
I don't know. I just think that
Generally speaking on, and I'll have to, I guess, go back and look at it on the application, it should say somewhere, and I don't know if the town already has language they're using, all applications and information submitted with regard to this application is subject to the New York State Freedom of Information Act. And keep it as simple as that. ABO reporting, all that, again, if you want to get in the weeds and state that as well, but it's not a consent because it has to be, you know what I mean? So the minute you apply, that's it. But
that's
again,
fine. Yeah.
it's $500 and it's a receipt for PPE. It's not your company's financials. It's not,
Well, but look at the last declaration. We talked about they have to submit financial statements, including potentially tax returns. And you're saying that this is all going to be public information?
Right. And again,
As
I don't even
opposed
know
to just
why.
saying,
I don't even know why we're asking for that, to be honest.
is that a statutory requirement?
Oh, let me explain that. So this is Frank's change. Most small businesses won't have balance sheets and income and expense statements. And Frank said that in order to, they could meet the requirement by submitting a tax return, let's say they're an individual, because the tax return contains in its body an income and expense statement. And they could submit, a self-generated financial statement. So
But I think
the statute says the financial statements. It doesn't
The
say.
statute does require a financial statement?
Yes.
Right. This is going back to inconsistencies with what we're trying to do versus what, and I think he brought that up, Tom, about the financial statements way back, somewhere here in the multiple discussions that we've had. And again, if we have to, take that, literally and ask for financial statements, that's fine. But, maybe Tim can chime in, but seriously, you're going to submit all that for $500? A business owner is going to submit all that. I wouldn't,
No, I wouldn't either.
But I'm just saying, this wasn't my point, really. My point was, and my point is that and I don't believe we have to spell it out either, that we have the person who applies consents that we have, that their information is whether it's public or we have to report it. I just think that we should let them know that it's going to be reported to our governing agent.
Sure, a
But the
disclosure, but let's not use
Yeah.
the word consent because
No,
the
that's
minute,
fine.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wasn't being a
the-
lawyer. I was just being, one
In the agree-
sentence.
In the agreement, section 12, there's a public information disclosure. It says the company understands that such information may be public pursuant to the statutes of the state of New York.
Right, they would have to, when do they sign that, Tom? What? Is
Well,
that when
before they get the money.
Okay, but
Okay.
it has to be submitted as part of the application? Or is
No,
this-
but we didn't decide that.
No, I mean, that
I
comes
mean, if
down
they
to-
wouldn't have submitted before because we haven't decided whether we're going to give them
Okay,
the
so when
money.
they give them the money, then we would tell them, it's, all this information is public information.
Well, quite frankly, the minute they submit the application itself is subject to FOIL. So,
Right.
we
Yeah, let
probably
me-
should do it at the front end with the application.
Yeah, let me suggest make it a one-step process, both for our benefit and the benefit of the small businesses. If you create a two-step process for $500, the reality is you're not going to get 50 applicants. We're not going to run out of money. Every single applicant that you receive could be disqualified for some reason that we've talked about in the kind of CYA language. I understand the need for it, but at the end of the day, we're going to issue a bunch of $500 grants to retail businesses that apply, and there'll be 30 of them, or 35, and it should take a couple weeks. I understand the need for the paperwork, but to Kate's point, let's just keep it simple.
What I recommend for the members to consider is to go back to the policy and add maybe as a new item number 12 or 11 language that says that all materials submitted will be subject to the New York State Freedom of Information Law. Leave out the consent, but make it clear as they are just making the initial decision whether to apply, that they know that FOIA is in effect. And then if they're uncomfortable with that, we don't hear from them. I don't want to get through a process, get an agreement in front of them, and then have them say, no, this isn't what I want.
I agree.
Yeah, that's fine. But going back to Kate's point, I'm just wondering if we can somehow fudge what financial statements means. Whether it's a financial statement relating to the $500 or the cost of the PPE, or whether it has to be a financial statement on the totality of the business operation of the entity.
Right. I mean, the only thing I can think of, and I don't think there's enough guidance out there either way, is that, the statute and the language runs on assumptions. Our only criteria is you've spent the money, right?
Right,
Up
exactly.
to $500. So what do financials have to do with that at all if the only requirement is show the expenditure? And, I would prefer to keep people's personal business confidential information confidential rather than subject it to FOIL. And I think, with reporting requirements, it's not unreasonable for us to explain, we did it on a reimbursement basis. It's a small amount of money. Here's what we did, and here's why we didn't take financials, because it didn't make practical sense.
Right. And we can document that the $500 was an expense incurred. That's all, because we've got the receipt, and that's all we need. We don't need the totality of their financial operation.
Go ahead,
Doesn't
Tom.
the financial, doesn't the financial statement go to the viability in the preceding year?
That was the intent.
So for consideration, we might simply be able to say internally prepared financial information or tax returns may be accepted or will be accepted. Adjust the language just a tiny bit, make sure that we have that discretion so that we are getting something.
But again, if it's up, keep coming back to, Kate's made me a disciple here. If we're gonna, if this is all a reimbursement, then do we care whether they are financially viable in after March, now, today?
Yes.
As opposed to we're going to reimburse them for their costs incurred, as long as they're still in business. And there's
you
got to be
wanna-
some declaration
Right.
that they're still operating.
Well, we
Well-
could do that by signing the application, sort of a, I don't know, I wouldn't say affidavit, but an attestation that you're still in business. I mean, why else would you be buying PPP? And the date on the receipt, should be within this time period. I don't know. It is, again, this is all tough. We are making it up as we go along, so.
Right. No, but they could have bought the PPE in March and gone out of business in July. And now they're applying for the $500. Yeah. So there should be some recognition that they're still in business. But I don't know that we necessarily need financial statements to.
Right, because the
Determine that
financial
as well.
statements could show a going concern, but technically they're not, right, Dick? I mean,
Yeah, I agree. I wholly agree. But I'm sorry I got into this whole thing.
No, but they're all,
Well,
we're gonna
My
get,
point
it's
was-
okay.
if we're gonna be sued, I want to know that we're on, solid ground.
No, my point was, I read the information. It's going to go in the Paris report and make sure they know. But I guess we're covered.
Can we go back to the third declaration where we say the applicant was financially viable as of March 7th, to say that the applicant is financially viable as of the date of the application? Instead, why do we, we really want, if the point is we don't want to give money to someone who isn't viable today, and they made this, they incurred this expense back in March, why don't we just say, do you remain financially viable today? I mean, you're a going entity.
David,
Can we
I-
pause?
I think-
Good
I think you have to
point.
be-
Can we please pause for a minute because we're about to lose Tim. I'm trying to
Okay.
buy myself some more time. It's 8:57.
Okay.
So before he goes, Tim Benicia, is there any other questions? I want to make sure that you're heard this morning. I don't know if the rest of the members will want to take a vote this morning or postpone it, but I do want you to have the chance to weigh in.
I appreciate that, and as well as the sensitivity to the clock. I apologize for having to jump in a couple of minutes. Very thoughtful discussion, which would any professional public official and citizen of the great town of Bethlehem, I'm sure.
We lost your audio, Tim.
Sorry, I'm good. Thank you for the opportunity. Very thoughtful discussion. Greatly appreciate all the contributions here.
Okay. Take care, Tim.
Okay, thank you.
Victoria, could I address David for a second? I
Please.
think you have to be careful of changing the requirements of the statute. And so the statute says was financially viable entity prior to the state disaster emergency. I mean, we're vulnerable when we don't adhere
No,
to
okay,
the
that's
statute.
fine. So we can say financially viable as of March 7th, and I don't know, continues to be viable, financially viable as of the date of the application. I mean, I don't.
Yes,
I mean,
that's
if we-
fine.
Yeah,
Fine.
if we don't want to give money to somebody who's since gone out of business, right?
Right, it's both.
Yeah.
But are we covering ourselves if we just make the applicants check that box that they claim to be financially viable, and then this way we don't have to look through?
I think we
That's-
need some documentation, but we can soften, as I said before, we can soften it, internally prepared financial statements under the declarations might be perceived as a high hurdle. But if we say internally prepared financial information, then we might get some very straightforward evidence that they remain financially viable. It's not a heavy lift for them to prepare.
Tim McCann, are you still on? Is he gone?
Yes.
Since I'm not a small business owner, Are there any financial documents that you prepare that are public? Do you, obviously, if you're a publicly traded company or something, that's one thing, but I mean, would you want your tax information public?
No, but your language says that that information may be subject to disclosure. If you ask me for it, I'd give the $500 back.
Right.
But I'd sign the document saying that you have the right to ask for it.
And then if we did, you would say, here's your check back.
You're not you're not going to, and you're not going to get sued for giving away $25,000. And if you get sued for giving away $25,000, the IDA or the town can fork up 25 grand. I mean, I get the need to get it right, and it's important. But from the recipient's perspective, they're going to fill out the paperwork. They're going to get the $500. It's helpful. It's not going to change the world. So,
right.
I'm glad we're doing it. So that's it.
Right. But you don't want to discourage businesses from applying because of the disclosure requirement.
I don't think people are going to be discouraged from reading the language. I think most people won't read it. They'll fill out the blanks and sign the bottom. For $500, there's no repercussion that the IDA could enforce that would be worth reading the document.
Okay.
I mean, if you really want to get comfortable with it, like I said, you can make it much more, not so much an application, but an attestation where, the business owner is attesting that, they were viable as of March 7th. They continue to be viable. You look at the receipt date, they spent it on, March 30th. Or maybe they spent it just recently because now they've reopened. I think there's enough evidence there to back up your due diligence. And again, it just goes back, all good stuff. You're all correct, but it goes back to $500. And
Right, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, if we leave this in here, the expectation is something is going to be submitted as part of this application. And if we don't get anything, that application is going to go to the bottom, as we said earlier. And we're then going to have to respond back at some point if there's still money available. So, let's not set up an expectation that these things are going to come in and then they don't. And now we're trying to figure out how we handle this. So if we take it out, but add some other language that reflects a checkbox that says the business is financially viable, we put the onus on the applicant to confirm that. I think that's the direction you're going in, Kate, as far as don't make them submit these financial statements, but you think we can still be in compliance with the bylaws that the state put out to us.
well, the affirmative representation by them signing it, right? And attesting, checking that box that they, March 7th, and now they're still in business. We've got the receipt with the actual expenditure, if this was a bigger ticket, then I think, yes, we'd have a definite duty to reassure ourselves that the business is viable. But, for $500, I just don't.
Right. No, I agree. There are IDAs that are going to be giving away $5,000, and
Right.
that's a whole different ballgame.
So does that change mean we strike that last declaration? And anywhere else?
About the financial statements?
Yes.
I would suggest that, yes.
I'm fine with that.
And then does it show up anywhere else in the policy?
What's the change to the last declaration? Financial statements that are attached.
Well, we're talking about whether or not we can eliminate that statement, and you're saying that it is a requirement of the statute.
Yeah, I'd leave it in.
Well, the statute doesn't say financial statements. It just says, in order to be eligible for a grant, a small business or not-for-profit must meet the following requirements: was a financial viable entity prior to the state disaster emergency.
Broad discretion.
It doesn't tell you you have to ask. It doesn't say you have to
I think
submit?
it does.
I'm looking through Hodgson Russ's summary. The loan item has more information, Tom. The loan item says creditworthiness of the applicant prior to the state disaster emergency.
Right, that's a great point. The way it's presented by the state kind of blurs that line and everybody gets in the weeds over loan versus grant too. And, you know,
Okay, I'm looking at the ABO guidance, page 2. Number 2, an eligible entity should provide the IDA with its financials as of December 31, 2019.
for a loan or a grant, Tom.
IDA funding
It says
may
grant
only
or
be
loan.
provided to eligible entities by completing the application. An eligible entity should, doesn't distinguish, doesn't say that it's, I think it applies to grants as well as loans.
Yeah,
Well,
I think
that's
it
not
does.
surprising.
The next one says eligible loan uses should be memorialized. So you think, well, this only
Yeah.
applies to loan. But then the second sentence says any agreement should provide for the recapture of funds loans are granted. So by implication, you need an agreement, even if it's a grant, because otherwise
Right.
you don't
But-
have an agreement for recapture.
Right,
So,
but
I mean, the trouble is the statute is not really precise. But on the other hand, we should try to comply with it. Otherwise,
well, the nuance really is they're trying to force you into doing it not how we're doing it. And that's what you're struggling with, right? It's mostly a prospective grant and loan program, right? So, you know, it's going to ask for more things up front. Whereas the way we're doing it is different. And I think there's a lot of leeway there, especially with the amount of money to, you know, say, well, we didn't do it this way. Here's the logical way we did it. And
so, I mean, I think what Victoria proposed makes sense. So we say we want financials, but we give them the option of producing whatever they want to produce as a financial, an internally prepared financial. We're trying to do that with a tax return, but you know, you seem to not want to use the tax return, but provide some
I'm not
other
sure-
way to provide a financial other than a accountant produce financial, or I guess a tax return.
Yeah, I'm not sure the ABO or us as an IDA have any legal right to a tax return of a private business, do we?
I would
Other than the
agree.
tax, other than the tax.
Well, I mean, we're
department.
not going to fight that battle.
No, I'm just saying so.
Well, then let's strike tax returns here. If someone decides to send a tax return as evidence that they're viable. But if we strike the language, maybe we stay out of that little sticky bit.
Yeah. Or we could
Okay
get
with
just-
me.
Yeah. We could just say financial statement demonstrating the viability, the financial viability of the applicant. And leave it up to them. They can do an attestation. They can do something else that says, you know, we're $1 million company, or we're a, you know, $50,000 a year company, and, you know, let it go at that. But they are just,
About just striking tax return and leaving financial statements or internally prepared financial statement. So that gives them, I think, a lot of flexibility to produce whatever they want to produce.
Just as a point of reference, you can just say financial statements, because all financial statements are deemed internally prepared.
Yeah, but I
Um,
don't, but do, you know, small businesses know that? We're just trying to give them, you know, a little guidance so that they
But we're not
don't think
asking-
that they need a UHY prepared financial.
It doesn't say
statement.
that. It doesn't say any, it says financial statements.
Okay.
I would read that as audited financial statements. And I think Tom's right that many people would. You know, we here on this meeting have the benefit of a lot of high-level professional experience, and the people we'll be hearing from have, you know, significant experience elsewhere, some of them.
Dick, would the current month bank statement that shows cash flow, would that be sufficient?
I don't know. I hate to start looking at bank statements.
Well, the tax return's only as good as the last period. That's, you know.
Oh, no, I understand.
Yeah.
I haven't butt in on the tax return issue. I just would use the word financial statement. But I understand what Victoria has said about, you know, it's common, you know, for Alan and me and for Frank, we know financial statements are management's, so they're all internal. But, you know, it's, you can just say financial information to show viability.
Yeah, that's what I would do.
Don't even, so if they give you, you know, we can make a decision in the committee if it's sufficient.
Okay, it's 9:11. I've extended my 9 o'clock start meeting, but I really do
Okay.
need to go, which means that we will not have a quorum and cannot bring this to vote. So I'm open to suggestions from the member of how you recommend proceeding.
I think we need to just revise everything pursuant to what we talked about and bring it back, unfortunately.
Yeah. And since it is a reimbursement for expenses, whether they get the money in next week or next month is irrelevant.
Right.
So I would bring it up to a vote for the next meeting.
That's, I think given the discussion here, which has been terrific and productive and truly what I was hoping for, that does make sense. What I would like to think about, and I don't know if we've lost Supervisor Van Leuven altogether, is because so many other communities are also moving forward with a grant and or loan program. I would like to see something on the town's website that says we are working on one, and, you know, so please stay tuned. If that doesn't, you know, tip our hand, because we ultimately have the ability to say, no, we don't want to do this. That's a vote of the members. But it might be worth telling small businesses in the town, yes, we know this is going on and we're working on it.
We can put a featured news item on the town website that says, you know, at this morning's IDA meeting, the board discussed the following, you know, final touches being placed on the policy and application, and we hope to have a rollout next month. Something to that effect, to let the community know. We've been in touch with Maureen from the chamber. She's aware of it. Kate and I are sitting in on a webinar panelist this afternoon. I plan to announce that we're rolling. You know, we're developing this program. Businesses are attending that webinar, so I think the message will get out, and we can certainly add to the website.
Yeah. Do we need, Tom? Do we need a formal resolution that we're going to adopt the policy, or we're going to create a loan program or a grant program?
Well, it's not ready. Yeah, I mean, you're not ready for it yet because you've made a lot of changes that you're going to bring up at the next meeting.
But we can say that the board has adopted, has agreed to establish a grant program, and without stating that it's up and running. We obviously, you know, we can't. There's no reason to proceed with any of these changes if we're not going to do it. So if we need to sort of go on the record as saying we've agreed to make the money available. And now we're in the process, as Rob says, we're in the process now of developing the program.
It'd be unusual for us to do that we're going to pass a resolution, that we're going to pass another resolution at the next meeting. I don't think it's necessary.
Okay.
Where I think the right way to do it is the next meeting, we have a resolution with whereases that says we want to create this program. And now therefore we've created it. Here's the terms, here's the conditions. This is attach everything to that resolution. So, it'll effectively create the program and then, the guidelines and also the application would be attached to that.
Okay, that's fine.
Well, Kate, all the three documents that were submitted today for approval would be attached. The
Right.
policy, you need to have a separate policy, an application, and an agreement.
Right.
Well, no, that's fine. But then I think, Rob, if you're going to talk about this afternoon, you, Kate, on this conference call, then you can't state that we've agreed to anything. We're merely in the process of considering or something like that.
I'm going to say there was lengthy discussion about developing the program, policy, applications, a lot of positive discussion, and hopefully to have a final program approved next month.
Sounds good. Perfect. Thank you.
So we'll take this up again at the next meeting. I really do need to go.
Okay, no, that's fine.
But Tom, your advice, because, Al has been sitting here so patiently for an hour and a quarter. If I go, are we adjourning the meeting? What are the rules here with respect to
Well, do
any other information?
we still have a quorum? Is Tim McCann on?
No.
I would also indicate, the financials are there. I don't know if anybody has any questions. We could just move the reading of the financial statements. They've been provided to all the members.
Right. I have no problems with them. No questions.
So do we need to approve the financials before Vicky goes, or?
I don't think we have to prove anything. We're just giving them
Okay,
Right.
then
just
Okay.
information.
we're good.
We're good.
So we can adjourn.
Yes.
Right. May
So
I have
moved.
a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. As I depart, there's no longer a quorum. I invite any members to continue asking about the process. But I have to go to Ohio virtually right now.
Fine.
Thank you all. This was a terrific meeting. I am so glad to hear from so many voices. Great insight. And we'll meet again in a month.
Sounds good.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Victoria. So Tom, you're going to make these changes?
Yes.
Okay.
Point of question. On the parish report, I think there's a $5,000